Anchoring bias. Imagine you walk into a store and see a jacket priced at 12,000 rupees. Your immediate reaction is, that's expensive. Then, in the same store, you notice another jacket that costs 6,000 rupees. Right away, you think, wow, this one is cheap. But pause for a moment. Is 6,000 rupees really cheap? Or is it just that the 12,000 rupee jacket has set a reference point, an anchor in your mind? Anchoring bias occurs when our decisions or evaluations are influenced by the first piece of information we receive, a number or a fact that becomes an anchor in our thinking. Once anchored, we start judging everything that follows based on that initial reference point. You'll notice this effect often in marketing, especially online. A product might initially be shown at 4,999 rupees, and then you see it discounted to 2,999 rupees. You feel like you've scored an amazing deal. I nailed it, you think, but in truth, 2,999 rupees might have been the real price all along. The 4,999 rupee was simply the anchor that made 2,999 rupees look better by comparison. The impact of anchoring goes beyond just shopping. It plays a role in everyday life too. Let's say someone asks you, do you think Gandhiji lived more than 100 years? Now, if someone instead asks, do you think Gandhiji was less than 50 years old when he died? The answers given might vary between the two scenarios. That's because the numbers, 100 in the first question, 50 in the second, plant different anchors in your mind. Even in courtrooms, anchoring bias has been observed. Studies have shown that when a lawyer suggests a high fine amount, judges tend to give harsher sentences, even if unintentionally. Why? Because a large number was introduced early in their decision-making, anchoring their judgment within that range. This bias also affects how we perceive people, opportunities, and chances. Picture this. You're in a job interview. Before the discussion begins, the HR rep tells you, the budget for this role is 8 rupees lakhs. Now, even if your qualifications could justify 10 rupees lakhs, you're more likely to anchor your expectations around 8 rupees lakhs. That one sentence subtly shaped your thinking. The power of anchoring bias is so subtle that we often don't even realize we're under its influence. So, how do we avoid it? Step 1. Be aware that anchoring bias exists. Step 2. Before making any decision, ask yourself, is my thinking influenced by some external number or prior information? Am I truly evaluating this independently? If you can remind yourself that the first figure or fact you hear is just a starting point, a reference, not a truth, you'll begin to escape the trap. So next time you're out shopping, weighing a decision, or negotiating a deal, take a moment, pause, clear your mind of that initial anchor. Ask yourself, am I thinking clearly? Or is some hidden number steering my thoughts? Because the truth is, most of the time, we are unknowingly pulled along by the anchor's weight. But now that you know about it, maybe, just maybe, you can free yourself from its hold. For effect, the healing power of belief is immense, but that doesn't mean we should ignore real dangers. Instead, fear should be managed, and faith should be prioritized over fatalism. This reminds us that our thoughts aren't just thoughts. They are reflections of our lived experiences. So the next time something fills you with fear, take a moment. Ask yourself, could this be the nocebo effect at play? Now, let's explore the four effect, also known as the Barnum effect. Imagine receiving a personality report that says something like, You seek approval from others, yet you are self-reliant at heart. At times, you second-guess your decisions. There are many talents and potentials within you that remain untapped. You read it and smile. It feels deeply personal, even accurate. You think, wow, this really understands me. But now imagine that this same personality report was handed out to 100 other people, and almost every one of them said, yes, this describes me perfectly. Now you're left wondering, was the report truly personal? Or did it just feel that way? This is where the Four effect comes in, a psychological phenomenon also known as the Barnum effect. It was named after psychologist Bertram Forer, who ran a well-known experiment in 1948. Forer gave his students a personality test, then handed each of them a customized analysis. Unbeknownst to them, everyone received the exact same report. The statements included general lines like, "You appreciate being accepted, yet you often hide your flaws. Your behavior can be inconsistent at times." Afterwards, students were asked to rate the report from 0 to 5, with 5 being perfectly accurate. The average score? 4.26, despite the fact that they all got the same report. That's the Forer effect at work. When we perceive vague, broad statements as being uniquely tailored to us, forgetting that they might apply just as well to anyone else. This effect thrives on generalized and balanced statements that seem insightful but are actually widely relatable. That's why things like horoscopes, tarot readings, palmistry, and your name reveals your destiny feel eerily true because their claims are crafted to resonate with almost anyone. Take this example. You've had your share of struggles, but you've handled them with strength. Who doesn't that apply to? Everyone's faced challenges at some point. Yet when we read it, our brain whispers, "That's me." That's the Four effect. It creates a sense of personal connection through confirmation bias. We latch onto what feels right and overlook what doesn't. But this phenomenon isn't limited to astrology or fortune telling. It appears in more serious domains too, like mental health counseling, career guidance, and even advertising. If a counselor or a coach speaks only in generalities without truly understanding us, we might still feel seen, simply because we crave recognition. The Forer effect taps into our natural desire for validation, making us believe that someone understands us deeply, when in reality, they may just be repeating universal truths. Now, the big question, can the Forer effect be harmful? Yes, if we blindly believe in such general statements. It can lead to false confidence or misguided choices. Hindsight bias. Have you ever thought, I knew this was going to happen, right after something occurred? If yes, you're not alone. Most of us feel that way. This mental tendency is known as hindsight bias, or pichol drishti pakshpat in Hindi. Hindsight bias is the illusion that we could have predicted an event's outcome beforehand, when in reality, we're only judging it after it has already happened. Our minds trick us into believing we foresaw something that, at the time, wasn't so obvious. Take a football match. For instance, your team loses, and suddenly you find yourself saying, I told you they would lose. But did you really say that before the match began? Likely not. This is a cognitive illusion, a trick of the mind. Hindsight bias creates a false sense of certainty. It happens because our brains like neat, logical stories. Once something happens, we mentally weave all the details into a narrative that feels obvious in retrospect, even if it wasn't clear at the time. That's why after major events like accidents, political upheavals, or wars, You'll often hear people say, it was bound to happen. But this mindset prevents us from recognizing how truly uncertain the future can be. The danger here is that it blocks us from learning. When we believe we already knew something, we don't take the time to analyze what really went wrong or right. Worse, it can lead to overconfidence in future decisions. Psychologists have demonstrated this many times in experiments. In one famous study, participants were divided into groups and told different versions of a historical event's outcome. One group was told outcome X, the other outcome U. Afterward, both groups claimed that their assigned version had been obvious and inevitable. In other words, once we know the outcome, we unconsciously start building reasons to support it, even if those reasons weren't clear beforehand. This bias also makes us believe that our judgments are more accurate than they actually are. Our confidence increases, but our ability to think critically declines. You'll see this effect even in courtrooms. When judges or jurors know how a situation ended, they may find it hard to imagine that the accused couldn't have foreseen that result. That's why hindsight bias can even compromise the fairness of legal decisions. It can also make us unfairly judgmental. We tend to blame others by thinking, they should have seen this coming, ignoring the fact that life is full of unknowns. Everyone makes decisions in real time, without the benefit of knowing the outcome. So, how do we avoid falling into this trap? First, remind yourself that a result might seem obvious in hindsight, but that doesn't mean it actually was. Second, when making decisions, write down your thoughts and reasoning in the moment. Revisit them later. You'll see just how different things look before the outcome was known. Third, when judging other people's choices, remember that you know the result, but they didn't at the time. You're looking backward, but they were looking forward. Hindsight bias convinces us we always knew, but in truth, we only add causes after outcomes. Real wisdom lies in recognizing this illusion and approaching our judgments with honesty and humility. Because the truth is, we don't learn from time, we learn with time. Placebo effect. Discomfort doesn't always lead to growth. Sometimes, growth comes from openness, from giving new things a chance. What is familiar today was once unfamiliar. Likewise, every stranger you meet could become someone close tomorrow. Familiarity makes us feel safe, and curiosity tries to protect us. But sometimes, that sense of security becomes a locked door, keeping us away from the world. If we can cross that boundary with awareness and reflection, maybe we can become the kind of people that others will find familiar and comforting too. Now, let's talk about the 12th point, the placebo effect. Imagine this. You have a headache. A doctor gives you a pill and says, take this. Your pain will go away. You take the pill, and after a while, your headache actually improves. But then you're told, the pill was just sugar, not real medicine. So how did the pain go away? That's the placebo effect. When a fake treatment creates real improvement in the body or mind, purely because you believe it's working. This is both a psychological and physical phenomenon, where faith and expectations trigger actual chemical changes in the body. The word placebo comes from Latin, meaning I shall please, and the effect does seem to please the body. But is this just a mind trick? Not really. Scientific research shows that when someone takes a placebo, their brain releases real chemicals like endorphins and dopamine, substances that help reduce pain and elevate mood. So, the sugar pill may be fake, but the body's reaction to it is completely real because it trusted the treatment and started to heal itself in response. And this doesn't just apply to pills. The placebo effect has been observed in therapy sessions, medical devices, and even surgeries. In some cases, patients have shown improvement simply because they believed they were receiving a treatment, even when the treatment itself was fake. This reveals just how powerful faith can be. But there's a flip side to consider. Is this ethical? If a doctor knowingly gives a placebo, is that deception? There has been a lot of debate in the field of medical ethics. Yet, many healthcare professionals believe that in limited and carefully chosen situations, placebos can be justified, especially if they are genuinely helping the patient. The placebo effect touches on a major principle in psychology known as expectation theory. When we expect something to work, the body naturally starts responding as if it is working. For instance, if someone thinks they need a sleeping pill and they're given a sugar pill instead, the body may still release sleep-inducing hormones because it believes that's what's supposed to happen. So belief and expectation can biologically activate healing processes in the body. This forces us to rethink how our thoughts can influence our health. Can disease be cured by positive thinking alone? Not always, but positive thinking can definitely act like a placebo, helping the body and mind move in the direction of healing. Just imagine, if a fake pill can trigger real physical changes, then how powerful might real confidence, genuine effort, and true hope be? However, there's one thing to be careful about. The placebo effect is not a replacement for real medical treatment, especially in the case of serious illnesses. Faith alone may not be enough. So it's best to think of the placebo as a supplementary force, something that supports the healing process, but not something to rely on entirely. Often, the reason we struggle to move forward in life is not just the difficulty we face. It's the limits we place on what we believe is possible. Confirmation bias. Let's start with confirmation bias. Imagine you're part of a discussion about politics, religion, or a social issue you strongly believe in. Whenever someone speaks, you only pay attention to what supports your viewpoint. Anything that challenges it seems either wrong or unreasonable. This isn't just a bad habit. It's a deeply embedded mental tendency known as confirmation bias, a trap set by our minds that shows us only what we already want to see. When you're convinced about an idea, your attention automatically shifts toward information that supports it. Everything else gets ignored or dismissed. Let's take an example. Suppose someone believes that eating outside food is always bad for health. When they search online, they'll focus on articles about street food bacteria, junk food, and the risk of heart attacks. Then they'll say, "See, I was right." But they'll ignore studies that show eating in moderation can be perfectly safe, sometimes even nutritious. Street food, when prepared hygienically, can offer benefits too. That's the power of confirmation bias. It doesn't show us the truth. It shows us what feels convenient. We live in a world overflowing with information, but our brains filter it. And this filter is shaped by our own beliefs. We end up in echo chambers, where every voice sounds like a repetition of our own thoughts. Now imagine this same mindset being applied to politics or religion. What happens when people approach complex, sensitive issues like social justice with this bias? They accept only the facts that support their side and label the rest as lies. Psychologists say that confirmation bias gives us a sense of mental comfort. When our beliefs are validated, we feel like we're in control. But that's just an illusion, one that brings temporary relief while shutting the door on new knowledge. This doesn't just result in poor decisions. It also strains relationships and fuels fanaticism and division in society. It's not just a logical error. It's a spiritual one because we begin to believe that our perspective is the ultimate truth. Just imagine, what if Galileo had simply stuck to confirming old astronomical beliefs? He'd never have said the Earth orbits the sun. What if Darwin had tried to confirm the creation theory in the Bible? We might never have understood the theory of biological evolution. Every major breakthrough starts when someone questions what they believe to be true. So how do we escape this trap? First, learn to truly listen, especially to those who disagree with you. Challenge opposing viewpoints. And once in a while, debate with yourself too. Second, diversify your sources. Relying on only one kind of content makes it easy to get misled. And most importantly, keep asking yourself, am I seeking the truth or just trying to confirm what I already think? Confirmation bias is like a mirror that shows us the reflection we prefer to see. But real growth happens when we step away from the mirror and look out the window, where the truth may look different from our beliefs. So the next time you come across new information, pause and reflect. Is this really true? Or is it just echoing what I already believe? Recency bias. Recency bias is something so common that almost anyone can relate to it. If your answer is yes, then this might just be your issue. The Barnum effect doesn't apply to just one person. It applies to everyone. It teaches us that not everything that sounds deep is truly profound. Sometimes, it's just a pleasant sounding statement. So next time someone tries to explain the depth of your personality, just smile and remember P.T. Barnum. Now, let's talk about recency bias, which is probably smiling in the background. Suppose you've taken an exam. You nailed the initial questions, but made a few mistakes at the end. As soon as you leave the exam hall, you feel like everything's ruined, even though you got 90% of the questions right. Your mind fixates on those final errors. That's recency bias. It's a psychological trick that causes a person to place more weight on recent events, seeing them as more important, impressive, or accurate, regardless of earlier experiences. This bias can be so powerful that it influences memory, decisions, and future behavior. For example, imagine you interacted with two people. One helped you in the morning, and the other made you angry at the end of the day. At the day's end, your mind concludes, this person is always like this, even though it was just one incident. Why? Because it was recent. Recency bias makes recent experiences feel more significant than older ones. It can cause us to either forget past experiences or undervalue them. Think of a TV debate. Several speakers talk for an hour, but the last speaker's words stick with you most. Or imagine a movie with a brilliant first half, but a disappointing ending. Now, you label the whole movie as bad because the ending left the strongest impression. This bias has roots in the way our brain processes memory, especially short-term memory. The brain naturally gives more attention to recent events, thinking they're fresh and more useful for making decisions in the present. But here's the problem. This habit often keeps us from seeing the full picture. Suppose someone helped you 4 times in one week and made a mistake just once. Thanks to recency bias, your brain might say, that mistake is their true nature. That's why in relationships, friendships, or even jobs, we tend to focus on the latest behavior. We make huge decisions in reaction to recent events. And this isn't limited to personal life. Recency bias plays a role in politics too. If a political leader performs well recently, people may forget their past failures. A player might have consistently performed well, but one bad game draws instant criticism. Marketers and advertisers also use this bias. A company might send you a last-minute discount, and you'll consider it highly appealing, even if past offers were much better. So, how can we avoid this trap? Before making a decision, ask yourself, am I considering the full experience or just the ending? Avoid making big choices based on recent emotions. If you've had a bad experience, take a day or two to reflect. Ask, was everything really that bad? Or am I under the influence of recency bias? Recency bias reminds us that our memory is like a lens. It doesn't always show the full picture. Often, it just displays whatever came last and presents it as the whole truth. But if we reflect with care, we can clear that lens and see the entire story, because the full journey of any experience is more important than just the beginning or the end. Focusing effect. Ask yourself, are you living a happy life? Your mind immediately zooms in on one thing, maybe your job, your salary, or a recent argument. At that very moment, whatever thought sticks with you becomes the basis of your answer. Yes, I'm happy. Or no, my life is difficult. This mental trap is called the focusing effect. It occurs when, in trying to make a decision, evaluate an experience, or answer a question, we concentrate on just one aspect, ignoring all the other available information. We place so much emphasis on that single factor that it ends up dominating our thoughts and experiences. The most interesting part of the focusing effect is how silently it influences our everyday life. It happens frequently, often without us realizing it. For example, suppose someone asks you, are people who live by the sea happier? If you immediately imagine the ocean view, the cool breeze, and the sunshine, you might think, yes, of course, they must be very happy. But do you consider that they might deal with traffic, expensive living, or storms? Probably not, because the focusing effect makes you highlight only the brighter side. It narrows your attention, and everything else fades into the background. This effect becomes especially risky when we're making big decisions, like selecting a college or a job. We might base our choice on just one factor, like salary, location, or reputation, and become so focused on it that we overlook other critical aspects. Its influence goes even further into political advertising and our personal relationships. In politics, leaders often direct the public's attention to a single issue, like unemployment, inflation, or religion, so that people forget everything else and cast their vote based solely on that one factor. In advertising, companies use this effect by drawing your attention to just one emotion. This perfume will make you feel special. You buy the fragrance, not because of its quality, but because you're swept up in the promise of feeling unique. Even in relationships, the focusing effect can trap us. Sometimes we fixate on one habit, one weakness, or one quality in a person, and their entire identity becomes defined by that single trait in our eyes. The focusing effect teaches us that while the human mind is powerful and quick, it can also be easily misled. So, how can we guard ourselves against this trap? First, ask yourself, am I focusing too much on just one thing? Second, shift your perspective. Try to view the decision or situation from at least three different angles. Third, pause before making decisions. Taking time allows your mind to process things from multiple dimensions. Lastly, list out at least four other factors when facing a big decision. Write them down and assign weight to each of them. Understanding the focusing effect is essential because it interferes with our everyday logic. It leads to narrow and incomplete decisions. But once we recognize this bias, we can improve the way we think. Our answers to life's big questions become more balanced, more comprehensive, and more accurate. Because true understanding doesn't come from looking at just one side. It comes from examining every perspective, peeling back every layer. And when you do that, your vision transforms, and so do your decisions.